us this evening. Although it feels very different to a physical meeting, we have become used to working virtually over many months. So in the circumstances, this is the best medium possible. I stress, however, that this is only part of the engagement process with members of the community. I am pleased to introduce Mike Davis, Chairman of Rayleigh Town Museum Management Group, who will be chairing this evening's meeting. I'm really grateful to him for giving up his time and the interest he is showing in the Council's asset delivery programme. Mike is a long-standing and very well-respected resident within this district, and he is passionate about the community and heritage across the district, but particularly in Rayleigh. I am delighted that so many people have joined the webinar. As well as taking questions later in the presentations, you are invited to ask questions during the webinar using the web chat facility. At long last, it is a pleasure to be able to discuss the proposals in more detail and invite you to share in the vision. I want to emphasize, however, that contrary to what I have seen reported in various places, these are just proposals at present. Nothing is set in stone, so feedback is not just welcomed, but vital to help shape what the final scheme will look like, both in Rayleigh and in Rochford. We want to hear what people think. The meeting will be recorded and shared for those who are unable to attend. At this point, I will hand over to Mike Davis. Mike, over to you.
My thanks to Councillor Simon Wootton, the leader of Rochford District Council, for that most generous introduction. We have a number of presentations this evening. In this, the second of two such webinars relating to the 6 sites across Rochford as part of the Rochford District Council Asset Delivery Programme. Tonight, we are going to deal specifically with the Rayleigh plans, although it is important to note that all 6 sites, to include the 3 in Rochford, are part of the overall package, and the panel are happy to deal with the overview as may be required. Thank you for agreeing to take part in our live webinar. Nearly 200 people have registered to attend, and we have received to date over 140 questions, to include those relating to our heritage, the Mount, the new community centre, the environment, COVID, financials, transport, and many more. And everyone's contribution, comments, and opinions are very much valued. Everyone's concerns will be addressed. The question and answer session will last in the region of 1 hour. And in order to deal with as many questions as possible, I ask that both questions and answers be as brief as possible so we can try and cover as many different issues as we possibly can. Indeed, some responses may have a more detailed explanation on the Rochford District Council Voyage Partnership website by the end of the week. Please be aware that you may appear on camera and be heard on microphone by everyone accessing this presentation. This webinar will be recorded, and by participating, you consent to being part of that recording, which, as with the Rochford presentation, will be available on the Rochford District Council website. The aim is to help maximise involvement by as many members of the public as possible ahead of the formal planning application, especially for those not able to be with us this evening. Please note that all participants must act in a respectful and courteous manner to allow a productive session where all will have the opportunity to listen to the presentations, to take part in the question and answer session, and to make their opinions heard. Should there be any continuous disruption or discourteous behaviour, which I certainly do not expect from Rayleigh residents, I, as chairman, reserve the right to ask the person to desist and removal from the meeting as a last resort. Questions will be displayed on screen so that everyone attending the webinar can see the detail of what is being asked, and then I will either call you to read out your question, or where requested, I will read out the question myself and pass on to a panellist. It may be that more than one member of the panel will answer different aspects of a particular question. There is also a facility and a possible opportunity for you to ask a question during the session on the chat line, which we may be able to answer during the evening, especially if it relates to a subject that has not already been raised or dealt with during the presentations. As we have received some 140 plus questions, although some are duplicated, it is just not possible to give a full answer to everyone this evening. However, as with the Rochford presentation, all questions together with the responses will be available on the Rochford District Council Voyage Partnership website within a few days. I thank you for your full cooperation, which is greatly appreciated. It is planned that this presentation will take in the region of 1.5 to 2 hours. I will now introduce the panel who will be presenting the detailed presentations. First, we have Angela Hutchins. Angela is the Acting Managing Director for the Rochford District Council. Matt Harwood-White is the Assistant Director for Assets and Commercial for Rochford District Council and the Senior Officer responsible for this asset delivery programme. George Farley is from GB Partnerships and is the Programme Director for the Voyage Programme. GB Partnership are the private sector delivery partner selected by RDC under a competitive tendering process to lead on the Voyage programme. GB specialise in public sector partnerships and development programmes. We then have Peter Buist. Peter is from Purcell Architects and is the lead architect for the programme. Angela will now speak on the background to this asset delivery programme, the project to date, how you can contribute with your views ahead of the final plans, to include Have Your Say, and the website details, and how all 6 sites dovetail into the overall plan. I'll now pass you over to Angela.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good evening, everybody. Many people have asked how and why we've come to this particular set of proposals, so I think it's worth explaining that in some detail. Officers and I first began this conversation when we were discussing what to do with the 2 event sites, which were at the time part of the Council's leisure contract with Fusion Lifestyle. We already knew that event sites were becoming a financial problem for councils. 20 years ago, when the leisure contract was let, they were the mainstay of weddings, parties and entertainment. But over the last 2 decades, that market has changed, and with more venues available for public hire and with better facilities, both the Freight House and the Mill Hall were looking pretty tired and were becoming uneconomic to run. That made us then look at the rest of the council's real estate, the Civic Suite in Rayleigh and the council's offices in Rochford, and we noticed a number of recurring themes. Firstly, they were all ageing buildings which were in need of significant updating, not just in terms of bricks and mortar, but also in terms of electrics, mechanics and technology to bring them up to modern standards like broadband, Wi-Fi, projection equipment, etc. They were expensive to heat, light, operate and maintain, and they had limited opportunities to go green. We also noticed that they were heritage sites, which limited the scope for widespread updating, and they didn't work particularly well as modern spaces. For example, the porter cabin reception at South Street is cramped and unwelcoming, and the Great Eastern Room at Freight House has poor acoustics. Finally, we noticed that the spaces were underutilised for their size, and that didn't mean that they were necessarily not well used, but they were the wrong size for most of their users. There were singular desk spaces that were needed at South Street and more, but not enough meeting room spaces or collaborative spaces. And the fixed furniture of the council chamber is so restrictive that it's virtually impossible to use that space for anything other than council meetings. And at other times, it's sat empty. We also noted that the hireable space at Freight House and Mill Hall was limited and often too big or too small for many ordinary events. And so booking capacity was limited and the commercial model was uneconomic. We knew all council we would need to be smart to find the money to upgrade these buildings. As a council, we have no borrowing, and nor do we have savings which could be spent without a strong business case to justify the investment. So we had an idea that if we could draw out the value of our sites, we might be able to use that to fund the regeneration with little or no additional cash contribution. But we're not experts in regeneration, and we wanted to test our thinking with those who are. So we employed external professional technical support to stress test our idea to see if it could work through developing what is known as a strategic business case in line with best practice government treasury principles. The conclusion was that the idea could work. It was possible to optimise the value of the 6 sites to generate enough value to upgrade the council's civic, office and community spaces and make the project overall broadly cost neutral. So the council decided to explore this concept further, and with external professional technical support, we took the idea to the next stage to consider various options that could deliver the outcomes of that upgraded civic, office and community space and cost neutrality. That piece of work was the outline business case, which was again completed in line with best practice government treasury principles. The option analysis in the outline business case indicated that doing the minimum, i.e. just backlog maintenance and ongoing operation of the 6 sites as they are, was more expensive in the longer term than regeneration of them. The outline business case considered the most likely options to reconfigure all 6 sites and achieve cost neutrality. It wasn't an exhaustive site-by-site analysis. It was a desktop study of how we could leverage the best value for money out of each site whilst regenerating every single one and putting in the least amount of additional cash possible. And we decided to approach this project as a programme solution because we wanted every single one of those 6 sites regenerated. We didn't want any of them to be left behind. We didn't want any of them to be treated more preferentially than the other. We didn't want any site to be neglected. So anyway, an outline business case is still a desktop analysis of the art of the possible, and you need to engage with the market to validate your workings. You need construction experts to do surveys and drawings and to tell you if what you think can be done is actually doable at the cost that you think it can be done. So we undertook a competitive tendering process to bring in a development partner to do this work for us. We didn't tell them what we wanted them to build. We shared the outline business case, but the brief that they were given was to deliver a solution for upgraded civic, office and community spaces, achieving as near cost neutrality as possible across all 6 sites. We gave them something called an output specification, which details what functionality we required, so what we needed the office, civic and community spaces to accommodate in terms of people and of uses, but we left it to the experts to tell us the best way to achieve it. At the end of the tender process, GB Partnerships was appointed. And I think it's worth pointing out that we decided to bring in a development partner to work with us because we wanted to exert our influence over the eventual design, not just of the buildings that we're going to retain, but also of the residential developments. We didn't want to lose control over the quality of the development, and we wanted to ensure that the regeneration of our important town centre locations was exemplary in terms of sustainable development. We wanted to show other developers how it should be done. There has been a lot of information and misinformation about the proposals for the Mill Hall. And so first off, I think it's worth repeating that no decision has been taken about the future of the existing Mill Hall or indeed the rest of the site. What we have is a proposal as part of a programme for the regeneration of the site. But secondly, it's also not accurate to say that the Mill Hall is being demolished and replaced with flats. The proposal is for the regeneration of the whole site. Of course, we're mindful of the heritage aspects, and we know we won't do anything which compromises that. In fact, we actually want to improve it by creating a better landscape around the windmill and improved access to the mount. At the moment, the vista of the windmill is the bins at the back of the Mill Hall, surrounded by a car park. The beacon and Holocaust memorial are placed on a small patch of green in the middle of a road. And the proposals will create a new scheme which is environmentally exemplar, extraordinarily high quality, and which will regenerate this part of the high street. Elected members identified that they wanted a new community centre for Rayleigh, and so indicated they were prepared to invest approximately £1.5 million additional spend into the programme to get something really special. But it was important that this should be a community centre and not an events centre. An event centre is reliant on a commercial operating model to fund it. And what we want to create is a centre for use by the community with a not-for-profit ethos. We are proposing to create a space which would maximise use by the community and which would also house our existing partners, RAVs, Citizens Advice and the Oaks Counselling Service. The council will also occupy facilities at the new community centre where residents can come in and speak with officers. And we're working with Essex Police to develop how they can use that site too for public outreach initiatives as well as private meetings, enabling members of the public to interact with their local policing teams. Questions have been asked about the car parking at the Mill Hall site, and the proposals do mean a net loss of 21 public car parking spaces compared to what is there currently. But that also means that 100 public car parking spaces would remain available across the existing Bellingham Lane and Mill Hall car parks. And all the proposed residential development will have its own private car parking in line with current planning policy. Now, we didn't decide to remove car parking willy-nilly. We were very clear with the developers and the bidders during the course of the procurement that removal of public car parking spaces could only be justified if it derived additional value for the relevant site. And I hope that when you see the designs later on and you hear the descriptions given by Peter, that you will agree with me that that additional amenity value from the car parking spaces is adds to the overall aesthetic of the design. Questions have also been asked of me if the council has worked out the cost of refurbishing the existing Mill Hall. So as I've said, the options we considered were in the outline business case, but as part of the competitive tendering process, we asked the market to tell us the best value for money solution for all 6 sites, taken together as a programme which would deliver the functionality that we required in our civic office and community spaces. No bidder in the competitive tendering process suggested retention and refurbishment of the existing Mill Hall as part of the programme solution. In other words, refurbishment of the Mill Hall was not the best value for money option in the programme. The detailed analysis that we've done with GB Partnerships tells us that a building which accommodates at least 95% of the existing regular bookings is the optimal size to deliver best value for money, and that's why we've proposed it. Now, remember that no decision has been made, but we can infer that refurbishment will cost more than the £1.5 million, which is the council's estimated net cash contribution for the proposed solution. We have a duty to use taxpayers' money to achieve best value for money, so that is why we've presented the current proposals. Before COVID, we were working on a solution which anticipated that the Mill Hall could have remained open until the new centre was ready in order to ensure a smooth transition and no closure. Unfortunately, the impact of COVID on leisure and hospitality changed all that. And although we're delighted that the Mill Hall is continuing to perform an important community function as a council, we face significant financial deficit in keeping the building open. Bringing forward the new building will mitigate the impact, but will still leave a gap. And that continues to be a problem for us, especially as we move towards recovery. And we will need to continue to keep that under review. We also need to work hard to support the approximately 5% of bookings for whom the new community centre will be smaller than their current needs. And we're talking directly with those users as part of our stakeholder forum and will support them to find solutions that work. And I would encourage anybody who finds themselves falling into that category to contact us and to be part of our stakeholder forum and help us with their thoughts and reflections. Solutions that might work would include using the outdoor space or a marquee, or maybe running the event over a number of dates. And because the council will be operating the new building as a community centre rather than a commercial events venue, it won't be a first come, first served, and the most lucrative event takes priority approach. We know that the community shows are popular and we want them to continue. So we will work together to make sure that it is economically viable for them to operate. The council is not interested in making money out of community uses. We've spoken to hirers who are sceptical about how it could work, but I'm really grateful to them for helping us to work through the details whilst we're still at this proposal stage. Their feedback is vital to shape and influence the development, the design and the space, and it's not just about agreeing the colour of the carpet. We waited to get to this point because GB Partnerships has now done the groundwork and satisfied that what we are sharing with you this evening is doable. It's always a balancing act to decide when is the best time to share information. Too soon and you risk the proposals being too vague and then we can't answer your questions. But we think that we've done enough preparatory work now to show you the proposals and to be able to speak about them with enough detail to answer all your questions. So working with GB Partnerships, we want to create new council buildings which are environmentally and financially sustainable for the future, that will maintain community facilities in Rochford and in Rayleigh, that will maintain accommodation for our partner organisations, that are true to our heritage settings, and that will create 21st century fit buildings with state-of-the-art technology. A lot of work has gone in to get into the project to this point, to enable us to share something with you that is more than just conceptual, to provide you with sufficient detail to ask questions, understand the proposals and offer feedback. But no planning application has yet been submitted and no formal counsel has been taken to proceed. So when we say we're asking for your feedback to help shape the next stage of this project, we really mean it. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Angela, for that very detailed presentation with an awful lot of information. And can I just remind everybody at this stage, please, that if you want to reflect on some of the things that Angela said, it will be available because this presentation is being recorded and you can refresh your memory or look at any particular parts of detail that you may want to. So we now move on to our next presentation, which is Peter. Peter's presentation will give specific details of the designs, the core principles, and the importance of our heritage relating to each of the Rayleigh sites in what will be the longest presentation of this evening. I'll pass you over to Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and good evening, everybody. So yes, my name's Peter Buist. I'm an architect from Purcell Architects. We're a practice of architects, master planners, and heritage consultants, and we specialise in working with buildings and sites that have conservation and heritage constraints. We've been working with GB Partnerships and Rochford District Council for a number of months, analysing and understanding their existing sites and developing outline proposals for their future. I'm presenting on behalf of a team of consultants that have been engaged on these projects, including specialists such as civil, structural, building service engineers, heritage consultants, tree specialists, and ecologists. I will now provide an overview of the work that we have undertaken to date across the two sites in Rayleigh, including the project objectives, the opportunities and constraints of each site, and the principles of our concept designs. As Angela has said, the designs on both sites are at an early stage of development where we have established outline concept proposals. And so we're in a good position to receive your comments and explore the incorporation of these into the designs as they develop. I'll start with the Civic Suite site first and then move on to the mill site. So with the relocation of council functions to the new community centre at the mill site and the Freight House in Rochford, the existing buildings at the Civic Suite would no longer be used for delivering council services. So our proposals for the Civic Suite site are for a mixed-use development to provide both residential and commercial accommodation. This will be achieved through the retention, restoration and conversion of some of the existing buildings on the site, as well as the construction of a new residential building. The scheme proposals will support the town centre of Rayleigh by delivering ongoing employment on the site, as well as sustainable town centre dwellings that meet local housing needs. The scheme retains public car parking in the market car park with a small reduction in capacity. The existing buildings at the Civic Suite are concentrated towards the northern end of the site. The image on the left shows the listed building known as Barrington's, from the junction of Webster's Way, the High Street, and Hockley Road. Barrington's is an early 19th century building of white brick with traditional sash windows and a projecting portico to the main entrance. Built originally as a dwelling, the building has been converted to offices and is currently occupied by BTMK solicitors. To the east of the listed building is a 1950s extension that accommodates the council chamber at ground floor and office and meeting rooms above. Set further back from Hockley Road and extending further south is the 1964 extension that accommodates council offices and meeting spaces. The image on the right-hand side of the slide is the current entrance to the later 1960s block and the main entrance to the council. So our understanding of the site and its surroundings helps us identify the opportunities and the constraints that inform our proposals. To the north of the site is the Grade 2 star listed Holy Trinity Church, and the site itself is located within the Rayleigh Conservation Area. We have therefore referred to the Council's Conservation Area Appraisal and are conscious of the impact of our proposals on these heritage assets. Within the site is the Grade 2 listed Barrington's building that I've already described. Whilst this is within the site, the proposals do not look to include any alterations to this building. The site is bound on three sides by Hockley Road, Webster's Way, and Bull Lane, each of which have their own character and scale of buildings. To the northeast is the Market Car Park, and to the south is King George's Park. The site slopes down from the higher level along Hockley Road to the lower level of Bull Lane. Much of the south of the site is car parking, set back from the pavement line by grass verges and chain link fencing. There's an existing memorial tree fronting onto Bull Lane, and the bus shelter faces Webster's Way. The existing buildings on the site are two-storey, but due to generous internal ceiling heights and the sloping site, these represent the heights of three-storey buildings. The Conservation Area Appraisal notes that Webster's Way lacks a defining streetscape, and car parking is identified as a negative townscape feature, with the view of the site from Webster's Way being identified as an opportunity for enhancement. So our proposals focus on improving the setting of the listed building by removing the less sensitive 1960s council administration block and restoring and converting the 1950s council chamber block. The proposals create a frontage onto Webster's Way with a new residential building that provides a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. We recognise the importance of public car parking to the vitality of the town centre, and so the proposals retain 55 public spaces at the Market Car Park. The proposals also provide both car and bicycle parking and amenity space for residents and employees. So this is the site plan of the current sketch proposals, with north to the top of the slide. The site is accessed via the existing entrance from Hockley Road, with the historic sweeping driveway retained to the front of the listed building. Car parking for residents and employees is provided along the eastern boundary. This car parking will be landscaped in a softer way, using finishes such as gravel and tree and shrub planting between the parking spaces. We've deliberately avoided locating new buildings in this part of the site to mitigate the impact on the existing adjacent dwellings on Bull Lane and Highfield Crescent. The new residential block is located fronting Webster's Way, retaining the green space and trees to the south of the listed building, and is set back from the pavement line. A new pedestrian access is provided to the south onto Bull Lane and opposite King George's Park. Looking from the north along Webster's Way, the massing of the proposed new residential block steps down from 4-storey block to the north, although the top floor is recessed back, down to 2 stories with dormer windows within the roof to the south as it wraps around onto Bull Lane. The building elevation is broken up into distinct blocks to reflect the historic plot widths that are common within the conservation area and to create a series of defined frontages onto the street. So in summary, the outline proposals provide 25 1-, 2-, and 3 bedroom apartments, with 35% of these dwellings being affordable. The scheme includes nearly 300 square metres of refurbished commercial office space. On-site car parking is provided for residents and employees with electric vehicle charging points. Secure bicycle and motorbike storage is also provided. The new residential accommodation will be designed and built to a very good standard of energy efficiency, using high levels of thermal insulation to minimise energy use and using air source heat pumps for heating rather than fossil fuel fired boilers. The scheme retains the listed building and the adjoining council chamber block, and retains the mature and established trees to the north and west of the site, as well as the memorial tree to the south. New tree planting and soft landscaping through the site will improve the amenity and the ecology. So a short walk from the Civic Suite is the Mill Arts and Event Centre. So I'll now talk through the outline proposals for this site. Our vision creates a mix of uses on the site that includes a new community centre and a new residential development, arranged around a high quality and accessible public space that creates a visual and physical route connecting the arrival to the site from the High Street along Bellingham Lane with the historic mill to the north. As with the Civic Suite, the proposals at the mill retain a proportion of public car parking that will support the town centre and the new community centre. The car parking within the adjacent Bellingham Lane car park will be unaffected. Again, our understanding of the site, both historically and in its current arrangement, forms the basis of our outline proposals, and we have referred to the detailed assessment of the Rayleigh Mount character area in the conservation area appraisal. The Mill Hall, as a building, was constructed in 1971, with alterations made in the late 1990s. It's a two-storey flat-roofed assembly building that has an overall height equivalent to a residential three-storey building. The site itself creates a transition between the town and the Mount. The open green space, located to the southern end, accommodates the beacon, memorial, and bench seating amongst mature trees and grass banks. While the entrance and frontage of the Mill Hall addresses this green space, it has a sense of turning its back on the historic mill. The conservation area appraisal notes the lack of a sense of enclosure to the site. Views from the southern end of the site through to the windmill are relatively recent, having been opened up with the demolition in 1998 of a large industrial building, which was latterly used as a sports hall. And this may explain the current lack of definition to the site and the disjointed relationship between the mill and the Mill Hall. The site largely provides public car parking, albeit carefully landscaped, with an enclosed sensory garden to the north beyond the mill. It has a number of conservation and heritage influences. The site accommodates the approach and entrance to Rayleigh Mount, which is a scheduled ancient monument and is an important area of parkland, accommodating mature trees and green space. In fact, the site itself occupies what was the outer bailey of the Mount. To the north end of the site is the 19th century Grade 2 listed windmill, and the site is in the Rayleigh conservation area. To the northeast and outside of the site demise is the historic terrace of 13 to 17 London Hill, which is also Grade 2 listed. The site slopes gradually down from the north, where the mill is located, to the south, and then drops further towards the west and the dense belt of trees that surround the Mount. The surrounding context is mixed, with building heights varying between 1 and 4 stories, and uses including commercial, residential, and community functions. The open space in front of the Mill Hall is enclosed on the north side by the Women's Institute Hall, a long rectangular building dating from 2000, but built in a traditional style. Home Regal House, to the south of the Mill Hall, is a 4-storey residential development, and the majority of former houses along Bellingham Lane that back onto the site have been converted to commercial office use. The east side of Bellingham Lane, opposite the site, is characterised by servicing areas for retail and commercial properties, and consequently, the conservation area appraisal identifies the view north along Bellingham Lane as negative and an opportunity for enhancement. The sketch plan on the slide shows the proposed master plan for the site, with north rotated to the right hand of the slide. As I've explained, the concept is to create a high quality pedestrian prioritised route through the site. To the east of this route, so to the bottom of the drawing, is the new community centre and public car parking. To the west, which is to the top of the drawing, is the residential development, which consists of houses and apartments with gardens and parking to the rear. The proposals include the demolition of the existing Mill Arts and Events Centre and its replacement with a modern, sustainable and flexible community centre that forms a better relationship with the mill. This will create opportunities for the two community assets to be used together for public and private functions and events. 30 public car parking spaces will be provided on the site next to the new community centre. The scheme enhances the existing entrance to Rayleigh Mount, widening the approach and improving the visibility and accessibility of the parkland. The proposed housing provides a sense of enclosure that has been identified in the conservation area appraisal as currently lacking. So this sketch shows the proposed massing on the site and our initial thoughts for the roof forms and elevational treatments. We've drawn contemporary references from the former industrial buildings that were on the site and the wider characteristics of the conservation area. The houses are located towards the middle of the residential development, and the apartments are located at each end. Gardens and parking for residents located to the rear. The new community centre rises from single-storey height to 2 stories, so that it remains subservient to the historic mill and preserves key views. As recommended by the conservation area appraisal, the vision is to create a public piazza and a unifying link that frames the windmill and draws people through the site. A view from the northern end shows the proposed community centre. The main entrance to the community centre faces the mill, with a new hard and soft landscaped public realm between the two. The new centre is to be as environmentally sustainable as possible, with a green roof, living walls and solar panels, and maximising natural lighting and ventilation where possible. Again, it will be heated through air source heat pumps, so there is no reliance on fossil fuels. Beyond is the proposed residential development that is scaled to a similar height as the existing Mill Hall building and Home Regal House to the south. So focusing on the new community centre, the building provides multi-purpose flexible spaces at ground floor, supported by kitchen and catering facilities. An entrance atrium that provides space for exhibitions and breakout functions gives independent access to each multi-use space and to the toilet facilities. At first floor, which is fully accessible by both lift and stairs, council office space and accommodation for the citizens' advice, RAVs and Oaks facilities are provided. The residential proposals deliver approximately 32 new dwellings, which is a mix of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments and houses. 35% of these dwellings, again, will be affordable. Dedicated residential car, motorcycle and cycle parking is provided, which is separate from the retained public car parking on the site. Electric vehicle charging points will also be provided. The project vision is to create a new piece of public realm for Rayleigh that celebrates the windmill and improves access to Rayleigh Mount, whilst delivering a new flexible community centre and local sustainable housing. Thank you, and back to you, Mike.
Peter, thank you for that very, very detailed presentation. I think we need to draw breath for a few minutes now after taking in all that information. But as I said, the details are available on the website and would benefit from further viewings as part of this ongoing process. It's now time for me to pass you over to Matt Harwood-White with his presentation, which will deal specifically with the benefits of the asset delivery programme and the next steps in this process. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Mike. I'll just wait for the slide to catch up. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. The proposals will bring forward modern, sustainable and energy efficient facilities, which represent the rich legacy of the district. The proposed facilities will ensure the retention of vital council services within Rayleigh from a new, accessible and sustainable community centre that is flexible and efficient to run and use. The community centre will include the provision of purpose-built office accommodation for vital community services to be delivered from. This will include provision for citizens' advice, Rayleigh, Rochford and District Associations for Voluntary Services, and the Adult Counselling Service. The Council's proposals for development have a strong focus on environmental sustainability, as Peter has outlined. The proposal is for the new community centre to be heated by an air source heat pump system, which in itself is a renewable source of energy and also typically costs less to run than a traditional heating system, together with roof-mounted solar panels. The building is proposed to be ventilated by mechanical heat and ventilation recovery to provide fresh filtered air whilst retaining most of the energy that has already been used in heating the building. Super insulated walls will also minimise the amount of supplementary heating required. The proposed design, as Peter has set out, incorporates a green roof, in essence a layer of vegetation planted over a waterproofing system that is installed on top of the roof structure, as well as a green wall, which will be irrigated using grey water that will ensure the green roof and wall are low maintenance. The proposed new community centre will save significant running costs. Heating costs alone will be reduced by approximately 65%. The size of the proposed new community centre has understandably generated feedback and many questions. The proposed community centre is smaller than the Mill Arts and Event Centre. However, our analysis shows over 95% of pre-COVID bookings can be accommodated by the proposed new community centre. For the remaining 5% of the larger events, there are a number of ways in which these can continue to be accommodated. And the Council is talking directly with those users to find ways to ensure that they can continue to thrive in Rayleigh. Turning to the proposed homes within the scheme, sustainability features are an important factor here also. The proposed new housing scheme to take advantage of the latest technology, which will be the most appropriate for each site. The main determinant being whether the site is new build or refurbishment. Where possible, again, air source heat pumps will be used as the main source of heating. These will connect to underfloor heating system. If this is not possible in a refurbished location, then it will feed a radiator system. Ventilation will be provided by mechanical ventilation and heat recovery systems. Solar panels will be provided at roof level in discrete locations, subject to any building and planning constraints. In this way, we'll provide local electrical generation and reduce overall consumption from the grid. In addition, electric vehicle charging points will also be provided on every residential site. As Peter set out, the proposals will also preserve and enhance the setting of the listed windmill, now a popular wedding venue, and preserve the setting of the listed Barrington's building on the Civic Suite site. Turning to social value. Social value has been a key theme since the early part of this programme, and that's about how we can secure wider social, economic and environmental benefits through the programme. The Council set out the importance of this when developing the early phase of the programme, and GB partnerships have responded positively. When we talk about social value, what we mean is things including skills and employment. The programme will create apprenticeships and work placements. We're looking at the local supply chain and sourcing locally. We'll also set out how we can protect the environment with sustainable solutions with energy efficient developments, as touched on just previously. And finally, and perhaps most rewarding of all, it's about engaging with local schools, social enterprises and local groups to ensure they all have the opportunity to engage in the programme. And my final slide, just setting out timescales and next steps. As Andrea has set out, and Councillor Wootton, this is a pre-application engagement process, and we want it to be meaningful and we encourage your feedback, either this evening through the Q&A function or via the link on the screen to the Voyage website. The engagement survey is now live and runs for an extended period until the 11th of April, and we welcome your views via that website. As I said, Councillor Wootton and Andrew have both mentioned how important engagement is to this programme at this early pre-application stage, and we do welcome your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for that very interesting presentation. I hope that all those listening to this webinar have found the presentations very enlightening. Indeed, they may well already have covered some or many or all of the issues that you have been unsure of to date, specific details. But we're now, without further delay, going to move on to the question and answer session. Some questions I will read out on behalf of the person who has raised them, whilst others will be raised by the person themselves live. This is a very important part of this webinar, and I hope you can sense already just how serious both Rochford District Council and GB Partnership and their colleagues are taking public involvement, public questions in the whole of this process, and that's going to continue. So I'm going to start off with question 1, if I can, please, which is a question on traffic. Now, just for your information, we've tried to be representative in a number of different questions and different topics. We didn't want to have questions only on 1 or 2 topics, so we are trying to cover a vast range of the whole gambit of the operation. So we're starting off with question number 1. I'm reading this out on behalf of Lee Streeton, who posed the question, and it says, there is too much development already in Rochford, and the roads can't cope as it is without you building loads more houses. And I'd like, please, to welcome for the first time this evening to answer this on behalf of GB Partnerships, George Farley. George, please.
And thanks, Mike. Yes, if I can, firstly, I think it's just worth thanking Lee and everyone else that has taken the time to send in a question, because they are valuable to us. If I can answer it by just clarifying that in Rochford, we're looking to build around 36 units across 3 different sites, each with their own parking bay. And in Rayleigh, this number, as Peter illustrated earlier, will be closer to 57 across the 2 sites that we heard about. And just noting that both of those numbers are all subject to review. And this evening's discussion, in fact, is all a part of that review. So that you can see these are not actually large scale developments. And I would also like to point out that these are town centre developments. And so the need for parking bays reduces as people will use public transport, they will walk or cycle in these more sustainable locations. So we will also be providing secure cycle storage for all the homeowners. I believe Peter touched on that as well. And finally, I'd just highlight that a traffic impact assessment will be undertaken as part of the planning process for every single location.
Thank you, George. We're now going to move on to question number 2, please, which specifically relates to parking. I'd like to welcome Shirley Page, who I think hopefully, with technology's fingers crossed, will be here to ask her question herself.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. Your plan highlights that 39 car parking spaces will be lost across the Mill and Market car parks. With the hundreds of new houses currently being built in Rayleigh, we will need more spaces, not fewer. So why are you building over them? You also state that for residents of the new builds, there will be at least 1 car space per home. A 3-bedroom property is likely to have more than 1 car. The 32 properties at the Mill development, together with the 25 at the Civic Suite development, will equate to potentially another 150 to 200 residents in the town centre, located next to or within public car parks. How do you propose to prevent the new build residents taking up even more of the depleted car parking spaces?
Shirley, thank you for that question. And I'd like please to ask panellist Matt Harwood-White to answer that, please, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, Shirley. Thank you for that question. It's probably one of the themes we've received the most queries on parking, as we'd expect. We do recognise it's a key issue, and we have received a great deal of feedback on it. So thank you for the question. As we've set out, but to give a bit more detail to it, the proposals at the Mill Arts Events Centre site do mean a net loss of 21 public car parking spaces. That's compared to what's currently provided at the Bellingham Lane and Mill car parks. But that does mean that 100 public car parking spaces would remain available at those car parks in total. The proposals at the Civic Street site would result in a net loss of 18 spaces from the Market's car park. All the proposed residential development, as Peter set out, would have their own residence car parking in line with current planning policy. And the proposals also include secure bike storage. I'd also say throughout the whole procurement process, which Angela touched on, we were very clear, as were members, that the erosion of public car parking could only begin to be justified if it added value to the overall proposal. We don't just mean by adding value for money, but also aesthetic value. So as Peter set out, in terms of the setting of the windmill, creating those open spaces and better framing, better use of the windmill and the space around it. Shirley and through Mike, I hope that goes some way to answer that question, which, as I said, we have received a great deal of feedback on. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to question number 3, relates to Rayleigh's Tower windmill. And we have Colin Page, who wants to ask the question, please. Colin.
Good evening. How can the council propose a huge 3- and 4-storey housing complex in the middle of a car park and in the only culturally significant area in the whole town? It blocks views of the windmill and cannot possibly enhance the area.
Colin, thanks for your question. And I'd like to pass this one over, please, to Peter to give an answer. Peter.
Thanks, Mike. And yeah, thank you, Colin, for your question. We, as hopefully what came across in my presentation, we do fully understand the historic and sensitive nature of the mill site. As part of our initial appraisal of the site and its surroundings, we feel that the heights of the proposals are conducive with the existing adjacent development at Home Regal House, but also historically the massing of buildings on the site that were obviously the cinema that was there before Home Regal House and the industrial buildings that were next to the mill up until the late 90s. In addition, the eaves height of the proposals are comparable in height to the existing Mill Arts Centre. Clearly, the heights and massing are being tested as part of this dialogue and this engagement process, but also through dialogue with the conservation officers and local planning officers as well, as part of a ongoing sort of pre-application discussion. In terms of views, the proposals have been developed to frame the views of the mill from the key points of arrival at the site. Those being from the entrance onto the site from Bellingham Lane to the south, but also retaining views of the mill. There's important views from the church as you come along the road in between the existing houses. So the development has been very much kept away from those areas to retain those key views across the town.
Thank you, Peter. If we could now move on, please, to question number 4. Which is relating to the Mount. And this is one from Derek Price.
Yes, good evening, Mike. My concern, my interest is, will the current entrance to the Mount be changed? As in the slope from the car park down into the outer bailey.
Peter, I think this is another one for you, please.
Yes, I can pick that up, Mike. Thank you, Derek. So the current access to Rayleigh Mount will be retained in its current position. In fact, the proposals for the site look to improve the approach and the footpath to the Mount by widening the entrance and making it more visible from Bellingham Lane. At the moment, it feels somewhat quite sort of recessive and diminutive when approaching the site from Bellingham Lane, and we want to celebrate that with a stronger visibility from the entrance to the site. In addition, we won't be closing or causing any closure of entrance to the Mount during construction, so that will be maintained throughout the project for safe access to and from the Mount. In addition, we also recognise the potential adverse impact to wildlife that a project like this might have. And as such, we've employed a qualified ecologist onto the team to advise on measures that we need to be taking now, and certainly before and during and after the construction process. I hope that goes some way to allaying your concerns.
Peter, sorry, Derek, does that deal with your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Mike.
No, thank you. It's important that we do have a fair exchange of views. Can I just make a mention, please? Those people who know me, by the way, know that I'm not very technical, and some of this technology is way ahead of me and beyond me. But I think I can just mention, just as a, during this presentation, colleagues who are feverishly working away in the background and don't want to be filmed have already answered and responded to 50 questions that have been raised during the meeting. So you can see that even if your question is not raised live during the meeting, all of the questions and all of the answers and responses and details will be available on the Rochford District Council website. So I now want to move on to question 5, please, which relates to heritage. This is a question from Anne Jolly, and I'll pass over to Anne. I hope you can hear me, Anne, for your question.
Thank you. Yes, my question relates to the new environment for Rayleigh's historic Grade 2 listed windmill. As you say, this is a conservation area. I have walked round the area with your site plans, and the new buildings, including the 3-storey housing, are far closer to the windmill than the existing mill hall. The area will lose its current open ambience and will look as if the mill has been parachuted into a housing estate. Rayleigh Christmas cards and calendars have featured pictures of the mill in the snow and through the cherry blossom. These iconic views will be lost forever. Is there any way you can adjust the layout to avoid this very sad outcome?
Thank you, Anne. I'll pass this once again. You're very popular at the moment, Peter. I'll pass this over to Peter to deal with, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you, Anne, and thank you for taking the time to really look at the proposals and visit the site. You're right that the current outline proposals do include new build development that is closer to the windmill than the current footprint of the Mill Arts and Events Centre. But the new build is further away from the mill than the current car parking area that sits, and sort of recycling bins that sit to the rear of the mill building. So whilst we're putting built form closer to the building, we feel that with the other sort of landscaping proposals and remaster planning of the site, we are improving the setting of the mill. I think the conservation area appraisal at the moment does state that car parking is generally harmful in terms of the setting of the mill and other heritage assets in the town. As I've explained in my presentation, the new build development has been located to create this strong visual axis between the mill and the entrance to the site from Bellingham Lane, and retain those views from the church through the buildings at the north end of Bellingham Lane. And the landscape gardens to the rear of the mill will be retained in full. So hopefully those picturesque views can still be retained, can still be achieved with the landscaping to the rear of the mill and with new public space to the front of the mill. Whilst there's obviously some existing trees will need to be removed to accommodate the new development, these will be replaced with a selection of species and location of new trees that are being carefully considered to enhance the setting of the mill. But I do appreciate your comments, and as we've said at the beginning, this is an opportunity to receive your thoughts and concerns, and these will be taken forward as we develop the design going forward. So thank you, Anne.
Peter, thank you, and thank you, Anne, for that question as well. We're moving on now to question number 6, please. And this is a question from Joe Gooch, who asked about COVID pandemic and engagement. So over to you, Joe, for your question.
Oh, there, yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I certainly can, yes.
Yep, cool. I just first of all, just want to say I hope we are going to mention the Mill Hall at some point, because we seem to be avoiding that so far. But my question is, why are Rochford District Council not giving the Rayleigh and wider community the courtesy of waiting until we are out of a pandemic before moving ahead with this engagement and these plans, so that a proper consultation, engagement and debate can take place with community in-person public meetings, and where those who are not on the internet can have their say? What's the rush?
Matt, can you answer this one, please?
Of course, Mike, thank you. Evening, Joe, nice to see you, and thanks for the question. Again, another key area, yeah, certainly we need to, needs to be raised and discussed. I think I'd say from the outset that the restrictions, the COVID restrictions, have presented real challenges with engagement regarding these proposals, and we certainly recognise that. We have worked hard to overcome this, and we are offering multiple channels of engagement to ensure we really can do as much as we can to reach out to residents on these proposals. We have placed detailed articles in the Echo, one for the Rayleigh sites and one for the Rochford sites. That included key information and facts regarding the proposals and also some of the images as Peter's walked us through this evening. We also created a stakeholder focus groups to ensure that we can engage with the key stakeholders and local user groups that use the facilities. And that was to listen to their feedback on the proposals and better understand how they operate currently as groups. We've touched on the Voyage website, but I'll raise that again in terms of how we're using that. We'll continue to use that to update all the key information on the programme, such as the background to the programme that Angela touched on her introduction, also the timescales and the details of the proposals themselves as they develop. That has a function to raise questions and complete a survey. We've had an awful lot of traffic through that, which is really, really useful and welcome. And I'd certainly encourage everyone to, if they're not already this evening, to log on to that website and to give us their feedback on that website. There's a free text space within that website, within the questionnaire, so you're not constrained in terms of the feedback you give us. And as I say, we certainly welcome all of that. Although we do recognise that not everyone has internet access, of course, or simply would prefer a different method to communicate with us. So for that reason, we of course have the option still to write to us at the main council offices, and we'll continue to promote that as an option to contact us. And we've also launched this week a telephone callback service. So in effect, that's an opportunity for residents to speak to a senior member of the team, including myself and Angela Hutchins, who you heard from earlier, to pose any questions and to provide feedback. So yes, absolutely, this has given us presented challenges, but I think we've done and we'll continue to do as much as we can to engage as fully as we can, to listen to residents' feedback and to make sure we build into the programme, consider it and take it forward. Hopefully, Joe, that goes some way to answer that question. Through you, Mike.
Well, not really. I mean, that doesn't explain why you're still pushing ahead with it when we're still in a pandemic. We should be waiting so we can have proper meetings in town halls. And the trouble is, a lot of people still don't even know this information. You know, you say, oh, you can go on the website and you can book a telephone call. I mean, if you haven't got the internet, that's no good. You should be doing leaflets to every property in the area so people are fully aware, and there should be in-person community meetings in town halls after the pandemic. It shouldn't be being rushed through when people's main focus is on their own survival of themselves and their families, both literally and financially.
Matt, can you just give a brief response to that, please? Did you hear that, Matt? Sorry.
Sorry, I just lost connection, Mike. Apologies. I'm back now, but the last 30 seconds. Apologies, Joe. I lost the last 30 seconds there.
No, I said you should be sending leaflets to every address in Rayleigh and the surrounding area, because it's a community centre which we all use. I mean, you know, there's been a lot of unsubstantiated claims about it being underused and under capacity, which is ridiculous, as you know as well as I do. It's booked on a per room cost basis, not capacity basis, and it's used every single day of the year. But that aside, that's a reason why everyone in Rayleigh should be getting contacted via leaflet, and why there should be public town hall meetings in person after the pandemic, and it shouldn't be getting rushed through now.
Matt, a brief response, please.
Yeah, of course, if I may. I believe, Mike, through you, Mike, Angela Hutchins would like to come in at this point, but just before she does, Joe, I completely understand those concerns and those issues. Just to flag, of course, as Angela did in her introduction, no decision has been taken yet, so we are still at engagement stage. This will still go to members in October for a final decision. We are still at the engagement stage. Yes, we've considered leafleting, and we have a campaign of that when the restrictions allow us to. But yeah, I completely hear what you're saying, Joe, in terms of that point.
Matt, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I think Angela H would like to come in.
I was going to say, can I pass over to Angela, please, to give a further response? Angela.
Thank you, Mike. Just really I think Matt beat me to the punch there. Essentially, this project has been running since 2019 and indeed in the early months, the latter months of 2018. So it's been a project that's been ongoing for a long time. We always knew that we were going to start to engage with the community as soon as we had proposals at a state that was sufficiently detailed to be able to bring them forward, and that time is now. But the reason we're bringing it forward now is, as Matt said, we've still got plenty of time for that engagement process to take place. We haven't yet got a planning application, and we haven't yet got a decision. And we're not planning to take any decisions until the back end of this year. As soon as lockdown is lifted at the end of this month, we'll look again at our communication and engagement strategy. We've already had some feedback from people who would like to participate in the stakeholder forum and from other groups of interested stakeholders that we need to contact directly. And then we'll be able to engage with them in a much more fulsome way than we can. As you know, the government roadmap prevents indoor meetings at present, and so it's just not possible under current restrictions to have town hall meetings.
Well, that's why you should wait until afterwards then, isn't it?
But that doesn't mean the business stops, and that's, you know, and the council continues to deliver business through digital meetings and to engage the public as every other authority across the country does. So
that's the reason to wait until after the
hard
pandemic, isn't it?
to make sure that we can achieve as many things as we can, and then we'll continue to keep that under review as the restrictions change following the Prime Minister's roadmap. Thank you, Mike.
No, thank you, Angela. That's a fairly comprehensive answer you've had from two of the panelists, Joe. I'm sure that if you want to continue with that conversation, they'll be more than happy if you do so via the website and the questions that ever you want to. You did mention at the beginning of your question, Joe, that you're disappointed and surprised, I think, as to why the Mill Hall is not mentioned. So if we move on to question number 7, I can solve that for you straight away. With question number 7, please, which relates to design. Will the new development of the Mill Hall, and this is a question from Dawn Wood, please.
Good evening. Will the new redevelopment of the Mill Hall include the green out the front to be developed, as it's the area that the whole of Rayleigh residents use on a constant basis to meet families, especially in the COVID situation at the moment?
Peter, perhaps this is another one that you can answer, please, to give details of how the public can relax in the various aspects of the whole of the development, whether it's the Century Garden, whether it's where the new Holocaust Memorial is going to be. So perhaps I can pass over to you, please, Peter.
Yes, certainly. Thanks, Mike, and thank you, Dawn. So I can say that the green space in front of the mill is not going to be built on. It's not going to be developed in terms of new buildings. But the proposal is to look at its re-landscaping to respond to new vehicular access and circulation into the site from Bellingham Lane. And that re-landscaping will look to retain the existing trees that are on that area as much as we possibly can. The proposals allow for the careful and sympathetic relocation of the beacon and the memorial. At the moment, we're proposing to relocate those to the north part of the site, either into the existing Century Garden that's beyond the mill, or certainly to the part of the public realm that's being created around the mill. And that will be away from the sort of immediate traffic along Bellingham Lane and the current sort of vehicular routes around the existing green space, and will ensure that they're fully accessible to the public at all times. So we hope that the new location will better reflect the importance of these civic memorials and be safer for residents to access. But we of course welcome, one of the reasons for these these sessions is to welcome feedback on options and any ideas and thoughts for any precise locations. We've also completed a full tree survey, taking into account the current condition and expected remaining lifespan of the trees on site. And the trees with the most value are those towards the entrance into the car park and near to the memorials. So whilst some trees across the site have got structural defects due to overcrowding, and some have sort of maximum numbers of years remaining in terms of their natural lifespan, as the scheme develops in more detail with input from landscape architects and arboriculturalists, we will be developing a replanting scheme with suitable trees across the site. So hopefully that sort of responds. As I say, there's certainly no, we think from an urban design and architectural and master planning perspective, that arrivals point off Bellingham Lane onto the site is really important. And certainly any sort of infilling of that with built form onto Bellingham Lane would be, wouldn't be the right solution in any way. It's about inviting and encouraging people into the site towards the entrance to the mount or up towards the mill that we want to achieve with the design proposals. Okay. So,
Thank you, Peter. As I've said, we are trying to cover during this question and answer session as many diverse and varied questions from the attendees and those who've submitted questions if we possibly can for the whole range of the whole project. And I know from reading various papers and various conversations I've had with people, one of the big concerns of the whole project regarding the Mill Hall is larger events. So I'd like to move on to question number 8, if I can, please. And this is a question from Wendy Edwards. So Wendy, can I pass over to you, please?
Yes, okay, thank you very much. I feel that a few of my questions has been answered in the presentations earlier, but I do understand the reason for the development. But my concern is the size of the accommodation it provides for larger groups and organisations. I realise that the proposed plan will cater for most of the groups and events that use the facilities already. But I would like to ask you to consider larger groups who already use the mill, as well as recognising that there will be occasions when a larger venue is required. I believe there will no longer be anywhere within the Rochford district which would be able to cater for events of more than 200 people.
Thank you, Wendy, for that question. And I think this is one that I'd like to pass over to Matt, please, if you can answer it.
Certainly, Mike. Evening, Wendy. Thank you for the question. As you say, yes, it's probably with parking, probably one of our top queries as we anticipated, and so quite right that we consider it this evening. In terms of response, I think you all know the Mill Arts Events Centre has been the mainstay of private events since 1971 at that location. But as I think we've sort of set out in the presentation, the building is showing its age compared to other venues in the locality. And the analysis does show that it was underused for its size pre-COVID, pre-pandemic. That's not to say that it isn't booked frequently, but the rooms were often too big and unsuitable for their users due to the running costs. So which in effect meant that the real charges would not have been competitive for those booking the space. So the proposed scheme, and as we've said this evening, I stress the word proposed, these are just proposals at this point, is to replace the existing building with a brand new community centre, which will be owned and operated by the council. In terms of the size and design that was arrived upon following analysis of the room requirements of the most popular uses of those rooms. So that means that although the new centre will be smaller, it's a total GIA, so gross internal area of about 437 square metres on the current proposals. So smaller than existing buildings, still big enough for over approximately 95% of the bookings which existing hall accommodated before the pandemic. So approximately 95%. For the remaining of bookings, that is, for the remaining 95% of the large events you referred to, Wendy, so those in excess of 170 people seated, there are a number of ways that we can work with them to ensure they can continue to be accommodated. We are talking directly with them through the stakeholder focus groups on a one-to-one basis to ensure that we can find ways together that they can continue to thrive in Rayleigh. So we are talking to them in detail at part of those stakeholder forums. It's also worth saying that because I've said the council would operate the building as a community centre rather than a commercial events hire, if you like, it won't need to be on a first come, first served basis or a most lucrative event takes priority. We'll be able to make decisions about things like hiring fees and charges so that we can support those local groups, those valued local groups that do use the facility currently and future, and groups in the future to come that don't even exist at the moment that would use the site. So I suppose in closing, we do recognise and we know that those community shows are popular. We want them to continue. So we will work together to make sure that they're economically viable for them to be operate from the proposed new community centre. Hope that's a helpful answer, Wendy.
Could I just ask another, but how many people can actually seat in the whole hall? What is that capacity?
So
sorry, is it just 170?
So no, it's a very question, Wendy. So the image that Peter showed earlier shows 170 seated theatre style, and the image Peter showed had space for a staging area as well.
Okay, yeah. Is it possible to be part of the stakeholder forum?
Absolutely. We absolutely welcome that. I think I might mention it earlier. Absolutely, we hold, there are a number of stakeholder focus groups and forums. We absolutely welcome other residents and groups to join those forums. My colleague Dawn Tribe, part of the leadership team at the council, is on this call tonight, working on the background on the questions.
Okay.
We'll absolutely collect that, and yeah, we'll make sure we get an invite to that stakeholder focus.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like that.
Wendy, can I just mention that I'm a member of that stakeholder group myself, and off the top of my head, I think the next meeting's on the 1st of April. But as Matt said, Dawn will be in touch with you.
Okay.
Matt, can I just ask sort of a half a supplementary, please? Because Wendy's question did mention, I believe there will no longer be anywhere within the Rochford district which will be able to cater for large events. Would you like to just give just a couple of sentences, perhaps on the Freight House and the arrangements within the Freight House for holding large events there, as well as in the new community centre? Thank you.
Yeah, of course, man, and no problem at all. So the proposals for the Freight House, and I'll put Peter on the spot now to see if he's got any the figures to hand. But while I'm talking, the proposals for that site are to refurbish the existing Freight House. We spent a good hour on this at the previous webinar. So that's about to refurbish that facility to enable the room to be subdividable, so for smaller groups again, but also for larger groups, to improve the access to the open space to the rear of the facility. Angela touched on, in terms of refurbishment, that would include a better acoustic solution. It's very echoey in there for anyone that's used it.
Yes,
so how we deal with that. And essentially refurbishing the site for the community. It's absolutely categorical that site will be for the community to use, to hire, to enjoy, and welcome back after that proposed refurbishment.
Yeah, okay. I'll speak with somebody again, I'm sure. Thank you very much.
Matt, thank you for that. You've just highlighted one of the aspects of the whole project is that we have to take all 6 sites rather than one site in isolation. I know that understandably, some people are more interested in one site or one aspect of the overall project, but it is the overall whole picture rather than just one individual for the whole of the Rochford District Council. So thanks to Wendy for that question. And we now move on to question number 9, please. This one relates to future management. And I believe hopefully we have Richard Lambourne ready to ask his question. Richard.
Actually, the question has changed.
Sorry, is that you, Richard, talking, or?
It is me talking. My question is about the refurbishment.
Okay.
Right. There has been press comments that the mill hall is dire and cannot be brought up to standard. This has been substantiated by comments tonight. Can this be expanded upon? I have STEM reports by ex-employees that routine maintenance requests have been declined over a 15-year period. Is that true? In any event, when did it become known that the buildings were unsustainable? And was that information shared with the council taxpayers? Also, what would be the actual cost to bring each venue up to an acceptable standard?
Richard, thank you. I'm going to initially, if I can please, Matt, pass this one over to you, but it may be that Angela may also want to
I think it's political as well. Simon Wotton should comment on this one.
By all means, Richard, yes, I'm quite happy for that. Matt, would you like to start?
Of course, Mike, thank you. Evening, Richard, thank you for your question. It's quite a lengthy answer, so I'll work my way through it, if that's okay. And as I say, Andrew may wish to come in afterwards, or indeed any other member of the panel. So I think it's in two parts. So to take the first part, the council has a contract with Fusion Lifestyle, who are responsible to manage the leisure buildings across the district. So that does include the Mill Arts and Event Centre. And they are responsible for the repairs and maintenance of the site and the capital investment of all the facilities, including the mill. The council monitors that contract through a contract mechanism, through site visits, inspections, operational and strategic meetings with Fusion Lifestyle. It's, of course, is a long 20-year contract when it was first let in 2002, and various leisure organisations have managed the building through those years, currently through Fusion Lifestyle. So hopefully that answers the first part of the question. In terms of the part of the question, Richard, talking about when this was first raised and sort of the process and when it was made available to taxpayers and the information, just to give a bit of background building on Andrew's introduction, the asset strategy, the council's asset strategy, was developed in consultation with members back in 2018, and that set the strategy for the vision and objectives of the council's asset base. So that strategy identified 6 key strategic sites to be taken forward as part of an asset delivery programme, and the mill was identified at that stage when that came forward. So the strategy, when it's first written in 2018, introduced an asset delivery programme which set out how the programme would consider the future service delivery needs of the council and determine how those needs and strategic assets should be developed to develop the key sites to meet those strategic assets within the strategy. It set out that the programme, the asset delivery programme, would validate the scale and nature of those opportunities available to the council, and essentially establish through a high-level assessment the best order of prioritisation in regard to the strategy. That essentially led to a strategic outline case, which then built into an outline business case, and that was approved by members in January 2019 and is available on our website. The programme, and as Mike mentioned earlier, it's very much a programme-based approach, was based on the premise of regeneration of all 6 sites in the programme, so 4 in Rochford and 2 in Rayleigh, of course, of which the mill is one. And that was about generating enough value through all 6 sites to upgrade our civic buildings, our office and community spaces, to make the overall project broadly cost neutral. The reason we took it as a programme approach is because we didn't want any of the sites to be treated more preferentially than any other. So for that reason, we didn't treat them individually, because we wanted to drive out the value of the sites to cross-subsidise the buildings. The question was therefore whether we could get best value for money across all those 6 sites. So moving forward, we took professional advice and we put together an outline business case in line with best practice and government treasury principles. The analysis in the outline business case identified that doing minimum, in effect, just backlog maintenance and ongoing operation of the 6 sites, was more expensive in the longer term than regeneration. The outline business case considered the most likely options to reconfigure all 6 sites and achieve cost neutrality. This wasn't an exhaustive site-by-site analysis, it was a desktop study of how we could leverage the best value for money out of each site while regenerating every single one and putting in the least amount of additional cash as possible, with the aim, once again, of achieving broad cost neutrality. So at the competitive tendering process of this programme, we asked the market to give us the best value for money solution for all 6 sites, again taken as a programme, which would deliver the functionality that we require in our civic, office and crucially community spaces. No bidder in the competitive tendering process suggested retention and refurbishment of the existing Mill Arts Event Centre as part of that programme solution. So in other words, refurbishment of the Mill Arts Event Centre was not the best value for money option in the programme. Richard, in closing, on this point, elected members at that point identified they wanted a new community centre for Rayleigh, and so prepared to invest approximately £1.5 million additional spend in the programme to create that proposed new community centre in the heart of Rayleigh. Mike, Richard, it's a lengthy answer, but hopefully that answers suitably the question that you posed this evening, Richard. Thank you.
I don't think it did, because I've asked you whether over a 15-year period you've declined, the buildings have been deliberately run down, and now all of a sudden we now have to replace them. And I find that you are saying that the process only started in 2019, whereas for a building of that size to deteriorate, it would have taken many, many years. So the council has deliberately run down that building.
Matt, do you want to just briefly comment before we move on? And does any other panelists want to add anything to what you've already said?
As I say, Simon Wootton should reply to that.
Mike, I don't think I can add much more, other than just to remind everyone watching that the outline business case is available on our website. It does set out the analysis we went through. And as Andrew set out in the introduction, this process has been going on for some time in terms of a strategic outline case, an outline business case, to essentially come up with the proposals at this point as a proposed answer to the questions posed in that strategy. Proposals at this stage will continue to engage, but no decisions, I stress, have been taken at this point. Thank you, Simon.
Matt, thank you. Richard, I'm sure that you want to continue that conversation outside of this particular forum, and I'm sure there'll be a number of opportunities in a number of ways for you to continue with your questions.
Chairman?
Yes, Simon.
Chairman, I'm more than happy to acknowledge Richard's request and come in if you wish me to.
Yes, by all means, Councillor Wootton, if you want to make a brief statement, please feel free to do so.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think that's a really interesting point that Richard has raised, if I may address you as Richard, please.
No problem.
I probably take issue with the word deliberately, because I'm not sure that sounds as if there was, intent to do it, and I don't believe that has happened. But actually, I accept the spirit of your comment by saying that the building is in a poor state, if I'm honest with you, and the public sector tends not to have a good reputation for maintaining buildings in terms of its actual structure, and there are many reasons for that. And I think with the outsourced provider with Fusion, I'm not sure that they've maintained it to perhaps the desired level. The trouble is that public bodies, when they talk about raising council tax, they always look at other services, and capital investment in the buildings just to pretty them up tends not to be high on the agenda. And we can have a debate another day as to whether that's right or wrong. I think it's disappointing, and I tend to be with you in that view. But I think we've got three issues here. We've got, let's accept, a bit of a rundown over many, many years for whatever reason. And I agree with you with the inference that you've got there. But we've also got to look to the future in terms of the environmental issues. And part of the goal of Rochford District Council is to look forward to the year 2030, when we have a wish to make our council overall carbon neutral. That is a declared intent, because sustainability, climate control, environment is now a much bigger issue on the agenda than it was a few years ago. So looking back, I would accept that there hasn't been good enough investment, and we are where we are in terms of the current building. Looking forward, we can look at the Mill Hall Arts Centre as it currently is and say that we probably couldn't spend well, it would cost a huge amount of money to bring it up to the standard required, as well as make it
how much?
As well as making it environmentally suitable. I don't know the answer. It's a blunt answer. I don't know the actual figures. I suspect it's significantly.
How can you make a decision without knowing the actual figures? Thank you.
If I could kindly ask you, Richard, I'm sure you, with the permission of the chairman, you can come back at me, but I don't know the answer. It's as simple as that. But a significant amount of money, I believe, and I probably couldn't even achieve that. The other thing is that there have been studies done on buildings of that size. Buildings of that size are neither theatres in the style of Cliff's Pavilion, and neither are they community centres. So the adjustment would be very, very difficult. So for those three reasons, I believe that what we're proposing is a much more acceptable solution. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wootton. I think, Richard, that you've had a fair crack of the whip there, and I'm sure that you will continue to raise your questions and your concerns in a number of forums over in the foreseeable future. But I'd like to now move.
6th of May is the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, I was muted there. Thank you, Richard. We'll now move on to question number 10, please, which relates to planning. And it's from Tara Meldrum, who's asked me to read out the question as follows. Why have people living directly near the site not been told about this? When applying for planning permission, we have to ask neighbours for any reasons why changes shouldn't happen. The view from my property will change the view of the windmill and surrounding area, was a selling point for this house, and with flats coming will be an eyesore, also adding to the very heavy traffic we get on London Hill. How can this be allowed so near to two historic landmarks in our town, the windmill and the Mount? And perhaps, George, you could start off by giving a response to that one, please. Thank you, George.
I will do, Mike, and thanks for that. And thank you to Tara, another great question, thank you. Of course, it is essential that the community, and especially neighbours to any potential development site, are kept informed, and that they have the ability to comment upon any proposals. I think the key point here is that, as Angela stated earlier this evening, to date a planning application has not actually been made. We are at what is called the pre-application stage, and that is precisely why we are encouraging feedback from the local community in order to inform the designs ahead of making such an application. I'd also just like to add that whether you comment or not at this stage, you will obviously retain the ability to comment once the formal application has been submitted. I would just say that we do recognise clearly the importance of both the windmill and Rayleigh Mount to the designs when we're talking about the sites that Peter illustrated earlier, and especially the views towards and from those buildings. And as far as possible, we will be looking to improve those views. And just to conclude, I'd once more just encourage people on this webinar to comment still further on the proposals by going to the Voyage website and making sure we hear them.
Just to reiterate that, there will be plenty of opportunity while this process is ongoing for further comments, observations, questions, whatever it may be, either pre the planning application or during the planning application process. I can assure you, from what I know, that the Rochford District Council officers, GB Partnership, and everybody are very keen to get all views, whatever they are, to include them in the decision making. While we're talking about Rayleigh Mount and the heritage, by the way, moves me on to question number 11, if I can, about archaeology, as it relates to the area and the conservation area. It's a question I've been asked for you on behalf of Deborah Mercer. Will there be any archaeological excavation time given to ascertain if there are any hidden artefacts buried under the car park? And perhaps, George, I can put it back to you, please.
Back to me. Thanks, Mike, and Deborah asks a very interesting question that I know will interest many of the local residents, and indeed I would hazard a guess that the chairman is particularly interested in this this area as well. We do fully appreciate the possibility of archaeological interest at the mill site, given its location adjacent to Rayleigh Mount, a scheduled ancient monument, and the Grade 2 listed windmill itself. What we have done at this point is to have completed an archaeological desk-based assessment. So this is all the sort of normal process that you would undertake. We've undertaken that for the whole of the site, and that then informs our discussions with the county archaeologist and other consultees on the precise investigations that will be needed in advance of any building works. So we don't know the answer yet, but we will find out the answer as to exactly what is needed before building work starts.
George, thank you very much indeed. You're quite right. I do have a particular interest in this, and I have a number of friends and colleagues who are members of the Rayleigh Mount National Trust, Rayleigh Windmill, even I say the Regal Cinema that used to be on the site of Home Regal House and the whole area. I don't think anybody's suggesting for one moment that there's any royal personage buried under the car park, as in Leicester, but we never know. And of course, it's an important part of our history that we need to be aware of and take into account. So thank you very much for that, George. I'm now moving on, if I can, please, to question number 12, as it relates to housing. And I've been asked this on behalf of Jill Hind. And the question is, how many flats of 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms will there be? And perhaps, Peter, I think this may have been covered earlier in the presentation, but perhaps I can ask you just to give an overview, please.
Of course, Mike. Yes, and thanks, Jill, for the question. So just to sort of confirm the current accommodation that we have achieved with the outline proposals that were presented this evening. At the Civic Suite site, we have achieved 8 one-bedroom apartments, 15 two-bedroom apartments, and 2 three-bedroom apartments, which provides a total of the 25 apartments at the Civic Suite. At the mill site, we have 14 one-bedroom apartments and 11 two-bedroom apartments. And then we have achieved 7 three-bedroom houses at the mill site. So that gives a current total of 32. Now, clearly, we're at the stage where we have the outline proposals. As those develop based on comments and the engagement this evening, and as I said earlier, other input from stakeholders and also through a pre-application process with the planning authority, those are subject to change. The designs will evolve and those numbers may move around. So certainly nothing is set in stone, but that's the sort of development quantum that the schemes presented this evening have achieved.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. Can I just mention, please, I do have 2 questions I want to take from those that have been asked while this presentation has been going on, which I shall throw some of my fellow panelists in at the deep end. But can I just mention that, as I understand it at the moment, while this webinar has been going on, there's been a significant number of questions asked on the chat line and various other forms. And so far, colleagues have already answered 88 questions from those attending. And as I said, just as a reminder, all the questions with all the responses will shortly be on the Rochford District Council Voyage Partnership website. So you can reflect on this evening's events, the presentations, the questions and the answers as part of the decision-making process. But I've just got at least 2 because I'm conscious of time, but 2 questions I could ask, please. One, and I'm afraid I don't have the name of the person who asked this, but it was from the question and answer. It's regarding the loss of trees, potential loss of trees at both the Civic site and also at the mill. but of course some of the proposals may be for more trees rather than less trees. I'm going to throw this in at the deep end, but Peter, could you give a response, please, from your perspective on the situation regarding trees?
Yes, thanks, Mike. So we've already mentioned, obviously, that we have an arboriculturalist, so a tree specialist on the team, and they have undertaken surveys of all the trees at the Civic Suite and at the mill site. And those have formed the basis of the proposals that we've shared this evening. In doing that, what they have undertaken is a typical approach to assessing trees on a site, which is to categorise those trees into categories A, B, and C, where A are the most important, significant, healthy trees that have a longevity ahead of them in terms of lifespan that are most definitely worth keeping. Category B trees, also, we want to keep all category B trees where we can in order to preserve those on both sites. Once you get to category C trees, those are ones that are starting to become compromised either through their lifespan, through the health of the tree, or any structural implications. Often it's the presence of the location of the tree near existing buildings that has an impact on both the health of the tree itself, but also damage on other existing buildings. So what we've done is to look at where there may be a beneficial effect on the site in removing category C trees. So to be then more specific, that's the process we've undertaken. More specifically at the Civic Suite, the trees to the north of the site that sit fronting onto Hockley Road, all of those trees are very important because they form a key outlook opposite the church, a key entrance point as you come down to the town centre and into the conservation area. All of those trees will be retained. None of those trees are proposed to be removed. As you then turn left and come down Webster's Way, there are a number of mature trees to the rear of the listed building. I think there are 3 substantial mature trees, all of which are to be retained. And that is one of the reasons why our new build proposal is set further down Webster's Way, leaving a substantial area of green space and retaining those trees to the rear of the listed building. There's a further larger mature tree that sits adjacent to the bus shelter along Webster's Way. If we can retain that, we are looking to try and retain that with the design of the building. We do have to be careful about root protection zones and canopy areas as well, but the intention is very much to retain that. And as I mentioned, as you then go around onto Bull Lane, we have a memorial tree at the Civic Suite, which again, not necessarily because of the tree itself, but because of its associated value. It's very important to look to keep that tree. The approach at the mill site is similar. There is some tree loss at the mill site. Again, we've tried to focus the impact of trees onto trees that have been classed as category C. I have noted on the chat that there has been a note made about memorial trees at the mill site as well. And apologies that wasn't covered in my presentation, but certainly where there are trees at the mill that have, again, associated importance because they represent, memorial or have close association with residents or community, people within the community, those will be looked to be retained. The master plan is at that point where it can adapt and evolve to prioritise those important features of the site that we want to keep. So that's where we are with the trees. As I say, it is still relatively early days in the master plan, and where we find out more things about the site through the event like this evening, then the design can accommodate that. So,
Peter, thank you very much indeed. I would, if possible, please, just like to get one last question in, if I can, please. And it really relates to possible changes in boundaries. And Kevin Hallis asked the question on the question and answer regarding potential boundary changes and how appropriate is it for a new council building in Rochford rather than in Rayleigh. Perhaps I could ask Angela to answer this question, please.
Thank you, Mike. I think it's worth saying that boundary reviews are always something that comes and goes within local government, but they are entirely out with our control. We're not in control of the timetable or the scope and scale of them, but they are kind of part of our everyday business insofar as we have to deal with the outputs of that. So I wouldn't necessarily rely on boundary review as a determining factor for decision making, but certainly we will keep a weather eye on it. I hear and very much and clearly understand that there's a natural pull towards Rayleigh, but the council's duty, of course, is to all of the district's residents, and that's why we took the programme approach to ensure that all 6 sites would be regenerated rather than just singling out 1 or 2. And it's worth pointing out, I think, that as part of our outline business case analysis, we did consider the merits of consolidating all council activity at the mill site, but our analysis showed that that wasn't the best value for money. So I think that's probably as much as I can contribute at this stage, Mike.
Lovely. Thanks, Angela. I'm afraid to say that not for the first time I've overrun my time. I'm afraid that time has beaten us, and I want to start to bring the meeting to a conclusion, please. I do hope that everybody has found it very interesting and informative, but also it's gone a long way to answer some of the questions, the queries, and the things you didn't really understand. I would like, please, to say just a few words of thanks to all the panellists who've been working behind the scenes, to Paul Wilkins and colleagues from Azuro, to Nikki, to Dawn and others at both Rochford District Council and GB Partnerships in the background, who've done very much wonderful work in helping all the arrangements for this evening's presentation. I would just mention that although we're going to close the presentation in a moment, the webinar will remain open for up to 10 minutes, just in case you've got any further questions you want to ask. But please remember that the consultation period is still ongoing, and you still have chances, if you reflect in a day or two on any other questions that you forgot to ask or didn't realise, or on reflection. Everybody within this project is very, very keen to have you give them your views. But I'd now please like to pass and return to Councillor Simon Wootton to say a final few words this evening. Councillor Wootton.
Thank you, Chairman. A personal thank you to you for the excellent way in which you have chaired this evening's meeting, and a thank you to every member of the public who has joined us this evening. It really is appreciated, and I think it is some irony that most of us, if not all of us, would have preferred to have a physical meeting. The irony is that through the technology and the times we're in, we probably had far more questions and the ability to answer far more questions through technology than we would have ever had the capability of doing in a physical meeting. So perhaps that balances out the lack of opportunity to have a meeting in that way. But look, I recognise the strength of feeling, particularly relating to the mill site, and especially to those with nostalgic memories of perhaps happy events that have been held there. Some individuals have already been very vocal in their opposition to the plans. Some have been supportive. I fear, and it is a factor that when people leave meetings like this, there may be some frustration that people feel that questions haven't been answered fully or satisfactorily. And I actually genuinely apologise for that, because there's been no intention not to answer questions that people have raised. But this programme is much more than demolishing a building. I'm afraid that I have to place on record my disappointment at some misinformation which has appeared mainly on social media channels, perhaps for political expediency. However, my job is to responsibly ensure our community is properly and accurately informed with the facts. I believe that we are doing that. This engagement is about listening and getting views, and also taking account of the broader picture. I accept and respect that there may be a wide range of differing opinions, but there has to be balance. It is about modernising and updating the council's estate so that it can support the whole community now and well into the 21st century. Our current estate fails that need on so many fronts. On the mill site, it is about creating a truly community facility, attractive to many more community groups than the current use within the existing Mill Hall. It is about a place where people can socialise, meet in their community groups, engage with the police, meet the council officers in a much better surrounds than the current civic suite, have appointments with citizens' advice, be a base to house the Rayleigh, Rochford and District Association of Voluntary Service and the Open Adult Counselling Services. For the first time ever, the Rochford District will have purpose-built offices in Rochford supported with modern technology in which all our staff can work efficiently. Environmentally, we will have sustainable buildings costing far less to run and committed to reducing carbon footprint, and a huge step towards the Rochford District Council goal of being carbon neutral by the year 2030. Just not achievable, I'm afraid, with the current buildings. There's been a lot of talk about cost tonight. Financially, we're talking about a net cost in total of £1.5 million. 1.5 million based on the proposal we're talking about tonight. And from the completion of the project, cost avoidance of between £250,000 to £300,000 per annum. And that is equivalent to a council tax saving of 3 to 4% each year before taking account of other costs in running the council. It will be fully paid for in between 5 to 6 years. And it will generate multi-millions in our local economy. There is certainly food for thought for me this evening's meeting. The webinar will be shared and ongoing feedback continues to be welcomed via the Voyage Partnership website, or you can write to us at Voyage Partnership at the Rochford District Council South Street offices. Can I thank you all for attending? Have a good rest of your evening. Thank you very much.